Hello and welcome to this new series of video tutorials which have been made to run alongside the pattern for my Christmas blanket for 2023, which is the Christmas Bauble blanket. I'll take you through stage by stage as we work each section of this blanket, and of course starting from the middle, we're starting today with the tutorial for the large bauble, which we make in the center. We've got 16 squares of these bauble designs in different colorways. If I just lift this a little, you may be able to see a little bit more of it. We've got blue, green, orange and hot pink, because these are the whole idea of the blanket is going back to using real vibrant retro 60s colours. So as I said, today we're going to be starting with the tutorial for the bauble itself. Now I'm going to pop back when I've got this put away and my yarns ready to start. First of all, have a quick look, a closer look at one of these bauble squares. I'm going to be working in the blue, so we're looking at the blue one to start with. Now the actual bauble itself is made up of just a few very basic crochet stitches. We've got treble crochet, half treble crochet, double treble crochet and double crochet. These are different if you're using American terms, and just be aware that throughout these video tutorials I'm in the UK, so I'm using UK terms, but it's very easy. There is a conversion chart in the pattern to tell you which US crochet stitches you're supposed to be using. Once we've got the circle made, and as I say, it's very straightforward, there's a little bit of what's called surface crochet, because I have decided to outline the circle to make it much more of a true circular shape with a surface chain stitch, and I'll show you how to do that. And also we have, just to try to make it a little bit more like a bauble, we have a little hook that I've made at the top, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm not going to say too much about it at the moment because I don't want you to get alarmed, because this is actually an embroidery stitch that you're going to be doing it, but never fear, I'll take you very carefully step by step through how to make this. And I think it just makes the bauble or the circle look more like a bauble. We then have 2 rounds of granny stitch to turn it into a square, and then when it's joined to its neighbours, it's joined with a simple join as you go method, which allows you to have a different colour for every square, and I've picked out one of the colours in each of the squares to make the joining edge. So we're going to start, as I said, today by making one of these squares. In the range of blues, I've picked out 3 colours, and I will just pop back to that to show you. This is Stylecraft Special, and I'm using turquoise, bluebell and aspen for the 3 colours, and then the other colour is the edging colour, which is a different Stylecraft yarn. It's Stylecraft Bellissima, and the colour for it is double denim. Right, so let's start with the first. I've got a 4mm hook, and I've also got my trusty sharp scissors and a blunt tapestry needle. Put these to one side just now. And we're starting with, in this case, we're starting with the turquoise. You'll see that in each of the blue squares, in each of all the 4 colours of squares, the colours are different in rotation in the rounds of the circles in each square. So I'm starting with turquoise for this one, but for maybe the next blue square, you'll start with the aspen, just to make each one look a little different. Right, so we want to start with, and I'm going to just move this a little so that it's easier to see. We're going to start with a slip knot on the hook, and the way I do it, I think I shall just bring this up a little bit so that you can see it clearer. The way I do it is I just make a loop like that, bring the working end, the long end, behind where I can see it behind the loop, and then I just pull it through with my hook, and that's my slip knot. Now you can start, and many people do like to start with a magic circle or a magic yeah, it's magic circle, anyway, a magic ring to start. That's not my personal preference. I prefer to start with the chain 4 method. So that's what I'll do now, is chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to just slip stitch into the very first chain that I made. So you just pull through your yarn, and what that does is it makes my chain 4 into a circle, and there is a hole in the middle. Bit difficult to see at this point, but once you start working into it, it will open up. Now I'm going to put a number of treble crochet stitches into the center hole, and to start with, you want to chain 2, which takes your yarn up to the height of your treble stitches. This chain 2 will count as the first treble stitch. Some people prefer to chain 3, some people chain 2, and I'm on the chain 2 side, so I chain 2 when I'm making a treble stitch. Now, to make a treble, you just need to yarn over, put your hook into that center hole, yarn over again and pull the yarn through, and you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over again and pull through 2. Now I know I'm probably speaking to a lot of people who have done that many times before, but I have to also consider those of you who are maybe complete beginners. So I'll do it once more. Yarn over, put your hook into that center hole, and you can see now, because I've already put a stitch into that center, it's much more obvious. Put your hook in, pull up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So that, counting the 2 chain stitches at the beginning, is now 3 stitches, and we're wanting to make a total of 12 going into this center. So I'll continue with the 4th, the 5th, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 2 more to do, 11 and 12. Now I've counted these, and I am pretty certain that there are 12 stitches, but I suggest it's always a good idea to just check, just pull them apart a little bit, and there's the first chain 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Get into the habit of doing that, because if you have miscounted, it will show up as you go on through the pattern and it won't work out. So make sure you've got your 12 stitches. Now we're going to finish off this colour, and to do that you want to just find that the top of the first, or the first chain 2 that you made, and pull through the yarn and pull through. And that's round 1 finished. You can cut your yarn now, and I just pull it through to finish it off. Now at the moment you can see that there's a large hole in the middle, but that will close up when we come to sew in all the ends. Now for the time being we're finished with turquoise, and it's time to bring in the next colour. I'm just going to double check. Yes, it's this one. It's the Bluebell. And what we're going to do is just look at the stitches that you've made and look for the little spaces between each of those treble stitches. We're not going to be working into the tops of the stitches, we're going to be working in between. So just keep away from where you started and finished. Go somewhere else to start this round. So I've put my hook into one of the spaces. And my method of attaching for this is to pull it through, yarn over the 2 ends, and then pull out the short end. And that's me got my new yarn attached for round 2. Now we're going to be making 2 stitches in each of the gaps, very tiny gaps there are, but there are gaps between the treble stitches from round 1. So I'm going to chain 2, again that is the equivalent of my treble stitch, and then make a treble stitch into the very same space, like that, and then into the next space and put in 2 trebles, and into the next space with 2 trebles. You can hear my hook a little squeaky, sorry about that, but it's a very hot summer's day to be making a Christmas blanket. It's a hot day, and I'm up here in the studio with the windows all closed because there's a bit of noise outside, and so it is getting hotter as I work. We'll just persevere. So that's another 2. So it's 2 treble stitches in between each of the treble stitches from the previous round. And this is round 2 that we're working on. Now we're just about to get to the point where we did the chain 2 at the in round 1 to be the equivalent of the first treble, and that can sometimes catch people out when they're working because it looks skinnier than a treble stitch. So you can see that maybe there. There's my treble stitch, and then we've got this chain 2 and then the next treble. So I'm going to put my hook in here and make my 2 treble stitches, and then yarn over and into this next space. The whole point is that you want to have at the end of your round exactly 12 groups of 2 stitches. That's keeping you right for the rest of the pattern. There we go. And again, as we did before, slip stitch into the top of the first chain 2. Just make sure you get that's it, and pull it through. And that's you finished with the Bluebell for the time being. Now, if your tension is a little tight, or even if it's an even tension, which is mine, you'll see that it is beginning to look a little bit cup-shaped. Excuse me. Yes, as I said, it can look a little bit cup-shaped. Don't worry about that. We're not turning anything over. We're working on the front of the design for the most of part of this square, so we're not turning anything, and it can pull in slightly, but it will sort itself out later. So we're on to round 3 now, and for round 3 we're going to bring in just a tiny bit of the background colour, which is this darker blue. It's a sort of grey blue And I've got it on my, I've got a big ball of this, so I've got it on my, there we go, on my yarn holder. So this is the darker blue. Now, if you look closely, you can see that because you put 2 stitches into each of those spaces, they have bunched together at the bottom and made a kind of V shape. So what we're going to be working on now is the space between these V shapes. So there's a V shape and there's the next V shape, but it's this space between them. So it's directly above the stitch from round 1, and that's where we're going to be working. And we're going to be working with a very small stitch. And I usually, for a double crochet stitch, I usually make my slip knot and then put my hook in and pull it through. It just makes it a little neater than the way I join it with the longer stitches. So I've pulled it through and I'm going to chain 1, and that's the first double crochet stitch. And then I'm going to chain 2. And the reason I'm chaining 2 is because I want to move over to this space here, which is on the other side of this V shape. So I need to chain 2 to carry my yarn over. So I'm going in there with a double crochet stitch. A double crochet is the smallest stitch and it's probably the easiest to do. Chain 2 again, double crochet. Don't be tempted to go into the middle of the V shape. You want to just go into jump over the 2 and into the next space. And double crochet means that you don't yarn over first. You just put your hook in, then you pull up the loop, so there are only 2 loops on the hook, and then yarn through and pull through the 2 loops. Chain 2 again and into the next space after the V, and you just work round in that way. And all this is really doing is, well, it's setting you up for the next part, but it's also introducing a little bit of the background colour in. I think it makes a nice little contrast to all the lighter colours and the brighter colours in the bauble. So you just need to work round with that, and you can see what's happening. You've got a little tiny stitch showing with chain 2 in between, and that's keeping it all nice and flat. So I'll work round to where I started, and I'll come back when I'm ready to start the next round. Now I have got round to just about where I started. Now if you look, that was my very first chain 1, which was the equivalent of my first double crochet, and this is my last double crochet stitch in the last space before where I started, and I've chained 2. So you just need to slip stitch into that very first chain 1 and pull it through, and that's round 3. Finish off. Okay, it is looking a little cup shaped, but that really doesn't matter. Now we're going to pick up our third colour of our range of the bright blues, and this is the Aspen, which is a pale turquoise. Just need to find the end of that. Here we go. And once we've done this third colour, then the next rounds are using the same sequence of colours again. So with the Aspen, I'm going to look for any of these chain 2 spaces. That's the kind of little gap that's underneath these chain 2s between the double crochets. So I'm just going to go in with my hook, and I'm going to just pull this through and attach my yarn. Everybody has their own way of attaching yarn. You just do whatever suits you. So that's me, got my yarn attached. Now I'm going to chain 2, and that chain 2 is going to be the equivalent of my first stitch. And in this case, we're not going to be doing treble stitches, we're going to be doing half treble stitches, which is a slightly smaller stitch, but I still chain 2 to be the equivalent height. Before I do the next half treble stitch, I'm going to chain 2 once more, and that's going to create a little space. So this first chain 4 is 2 chains to be the equivalent of the half treble, and then 2 chains. And now to make my half treble, I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to go into that very same space, pull up my loop, and I've got 3 loops on the hook. I'm going to yarn over, and this time I'm going to pull through all 3 of these loops, and that's a half treble stitch. Just tighten that first one up, and then I'm going to yarn over and into my next space below the 2 chains. I'm going to make 1 treble and then chain 2 and then another treble in that same space, and then we just continue round in each of the spaces. 1 treble, chain 2 and 1 treble, and no chains between the, it's only in chain 2 when you're making this little V-shaped part. There's no chains, we just go straight to the next space with treble, chain 2, no, not treble, half treble and half treble. There we go. And you can see what's happening. You've got a new little V shape and a chain 2 above it. So I'll work around as usual, and I'll come back when I'm ready to finish this round, and then we'll move on from there. So here I am, I've got one last V-shaped cluster to do. So I've got my half treble, chain 2 and half treble in the last of the spaces, and then just as normal you want to finish off by slip stitching into the top of the first chain 2, pull it through and through. So that is round 4. Now here you can see how it's beginning to look, and we're going back to the turquoise. For this was the very first colour we used, and we're going back to the turquoise for this next round. Again, we've got very obvious little V shapes, and it's in those V shapes that you're going to be working, and we're still working with half treble stitches. So I shall chain 2 to be my first half treble stitch, one, 2, and then I'm going to put 4 more half trebles in that space. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 5 stitches because we count the first chain 2 as the first treble. And we're going to put 5 stitches in each of those V shapes all the way round. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now don't do anything in, I'll use my needle, don't do anything in this point. It's only in the point in the section where you've done the chain 2 in the previous round that you put the 5 stitches. So I'll work round again with my 5 half trebles in each of these spaces, and I'll see you as usual when I get to the end. And this is round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 finished. It's looking nice and flat again because this has been quite a stabilizing round and has the weight of it has held everything down quite nicely. As usual, I just need to slip stitch into the top of the first chain 2, and that's the round ready to finish off. I have also pulled through all of these ends to the back. Now we are accumulating 2 tails for each round, and so there is the job to stitch these in later, and it will have to be as you go with each square. And there's a very practical reason which I'll explain in a minute, but they will have to be tackled. But I think it's eminently worthwhile to have all these ends to sew in, because you do get this really interesting pattern forming. Right, so looking to the next colour, we had, because we're doing it in sequence, we had our turquoise, so the next colour we're going to pick up is the bluebell again. And this is going to make a stitch which will kind of just outline the circle, but it's not, you can see that it's not an even circle, it's a little rippled, which is fine. I mean, I think that's nice in the pattern, but to make it into the bauble shape, we will be sorting that out later. Also, it's a good idea to count, just to check. Everything that we've done so far has been 12s as you go round, and this is no exception. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You've got 12 clusters of 5 half trebles, and make sure that you do have that. Now, this time, unlike any of the other rounds, we're actually going to be working into the tops of the stitches. So what we want to do is start at the very, if you look at a group of 5, we're going to be starting in the first stitch. So if you look at your group here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're going to make your first stitch in that space or top of the stitch. Now we're going to be working again with the little double crochet stitches. So I've put my slip knot on the hook at the back and pulling it through, and chain 1. That's my equivalent of my first double crochet, and then into the next stitch with a double crochet, and the next one, count them as you go, that's 3, we've got 4, and then a 5th one. So we've just really edged that with 5 double crochet stitches. And then we're going to do something a little different. We're going to make a treble stitch, so we yarn over. And if you look at this round, which is the aspen coloured round, you're going to go right down there and just go in between the upside down V shapes and pull up your loop. You've got 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that has jumped down to the aspen coloured round, and we're going to do that every time we've completed our 5 double crochet stitches. Now if you look at this group, which is the next one along, and count back from the 5th one, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll see that number 5 is actually pretty much, or the first one is actually pretty much hidden, so you need to just pull that out to make your double crochet stitch. If I'm stopping and starting a bit here, it's because not only do we have hot summer's day, but there's probably a high pollen count which is catching my throat every so often, so a quick drink of water now and again is needed. So I've done 1 double crochet, and you put another 4 in, picking up the 2 top loops of each of the stitches from the previous round. like so. And then it's time to make another treble crochet, going right down and underneath and picking up the treble crochet. I'll do that a little bit slower in the next one. And then again, if you can't see the very first stitch to work into, just go to here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it is hiding in there. That's your very first stitch to put your double crochet. 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over and go right down. I tend to, you can see that there's a little hole, but I go right underneath, and so I'm really making a clean gap between the dark blue and the aspen, going right down there. Pull up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, pull through 2, pull through 2. And then this one is easier to see. That's my first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, and then one more treble crochet right down, pull up the loop, and what I do is I just pull this last loop up so that it's up to the height of where I've been working the double crochets, pull through 2 and pull through 2. So it's kind of like spokes of a wheel appearing, and it's also blending the colours in together a little bit. So I'll work round 5 stitches, double crochet stitches, and then 1 treble all the way round, and I'll see you when I've got to the end of this round. I've come back when I've just got my last 5 stitches to do, because I have got to the point where the stopping and starting from the previous round is, and that can be a little bit more tricky to do. Now, it just so happened that mine happens to be in the last group. You may have started in a different point and you may have come across this already, but if it's difficult to see where to put your hook, just count back 1, 2, 3, 4, and this funny part here is where we're going to make the first double crochet. So just put your hook in the best you can to make your stitch, and then you've still got another 1, 2, 3, 4 to do. One, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 altogether. Now don't forget about the next treble crochet stitch. You've still got 1 to put in before we finish off, so that goes in. That's your final spoke, and that's your treble crochet, and now you can slip stitch into the top of the first double crochet, or the first chain one that you did as the equivalent of the double crochet, and cut the yarn. Now you can see that we are beginning to get a little bumpy, and don't worry about that. The reason this has happened is because the double crochet stitch is a smaller, slightly tighter stitch than anything else, and so it's pulling it in slightly, but that will all get resolved as we go on. And that is all we need to do. That's the circle finished. So we're going to move on to the background colour, and this is round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is round 7, and this is where we're going to turn our crochet from a circle into a square. And the way we do that is that we make corners with the longest stitches, so they're double treble crochet stitches. We make corners out of that, and then we go slightly smaller, because if you imagine a square, let me see if I've got, I'll use my ruler. We're wanting to get a straight line along here and down to make the square. So we've got our longest stitches at this point, and then they get slightly smaller by decreasing from a double treble to a treble to a half treble to a double, and then we start to get bigger again until we get to the next corner. So that's what we're going to do now. We're starting with a corner, and the starting point is going to be the middle stitch of that group of 5. Now, I've just worked out a way that for me it's I quite like to do it, and that is to look for the treble stitch that you did in the previous round and count that as, well, let's just count it as number 1. So then we've got 1, 2, 3, and we go into the next stitch. So it's 1, 2, 3, and into there. Now that really is, I just identify that treble stitch. It seems to jump out more clearly for me, and then I can count that as the first, and then we've got a group of 5, so you've got 1, 2, a middle one, 1, 2. So that's how I just work out my center stitch. You'll maybe find a different way of doing it, but that's the way I do. So I've attached my yarn, and I'm going to make my double treble stitches for this corner. We're going to only do half of the corner first, and we'll come back and finish it off when we've worked all the way round. So for a double treble, the equivalent in chains is 1, 2, 3 chain stitches. Now double treble, to make it a bigger stitch, is you wrap it twice around your hook, and then we're going to go into that very same stitch and pull up a loop. And as you can see, there are 4 loops on the hook, and we're going to yarn over and pull through just the first 2, and then yarn over and pull through the next 2, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2, and that's a double treble stitch. Twice round the hook, into the very same stitch, pull up your loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's the first half of the first corner made. And now we're going to find the next cluster that we're going to put in is right above that treble stitch. So actually what happens when you're making a stitch is that the top, this is the post, the long part is the post of the stitch, and then this V shape is the top. And when you're making a stitch, you often find, or you will find, that the top of the stitch excuse me, the top of the stitch is just very, very slightly to the right of the post of the stitch. So that, or you can count 1, 2, and into the third one along, and this is where we're going to put our next group. Now we're going to be smaller, so we're going to put 3 treble stitches, not double trebles. 1, 2, 3. Now we need to find the midpoint between the of the group of 5 from the previous round, and again I just have got into the habit of finding my treble stitch, 1, 2, 3, and in this is the middle. So I'm going to yarn over, and this time we're going to put 3 half trebles in. 1, 2, 3. And the next group will fit immediately above the treble stitch from the previous round, and we're just going to put 3 double crochet stitches in. 1, 2, 3. So we have got smaller, as you can see, and it's creating a straight edge. Now we need to start to get slightly bigger again, so I look for my long stitch and count back 1, 2, 3, and we're going in here, yarn over, and 3 half trebles, 3, and then we can go into the large, or the stitch above the treble. It does actually look very slightly, it's a very slightly bigger stitch top than the double crochet one, so it's quite easy to see. So it's time to do 3 treble stitches, 1, 2, 3, and then we're back to going into the middle stitch, 1, 2, 3 there, and wrap twice. We're onto a corner now, so in there with the double treble stitch, 1 twice, in, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, and we're making a complete corner this time. So we've got 3 double trebles, and then to actually make the point where it turns the corner, we've got to chain 2, and then 3 more double trebles in that same stitch. Sounds as if there's a lot with six new stitches going into that, the top of that one stitch, but it's no problem. And that's just gone round the corner, as you can see, and that chain 2 created the corner. And now we just have to repeat what we've done. We have to get smaller, so we're going to go to the next large stitch and put in 3 large stitch, it's the treble stitch from the round below, put in 3 trebles, and then find our middle again, 1, 2, 3, and put in 3 half trebles, and then we get to the next long stitch and put in 3 double crochets. So that's us halfway along the second side, so we need to start getting bigger. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 3 half trebles, 1, 2, 3. You'll be maybe wondering, you know, as I'm working with this Stylecraft Bellissima, why I have chosen a different yarn for this background. And honestly, it's nothing to do with the actual yarn, it's the colour. I wanted a fairly dark blue, but I wanted it to be a kind of softened dark blue, and this double denim is a nice soft shade. There isn't an equivalent in the Stylecraft Special, it tends to be a bit stronger, and I wanted it to kind of fade into the background, so that's why I chose the Bellissima. So we need to do 3 treble crochet stitches, and then we're on to the next corner, and that's a repeat all the way round of what we've done. So I'm going to continue. The next one will be 3 double trebles, chain 2, 3 double trebles, and then 3 trebles, 3 half trebles, 3 doubles, 3 half trebles, 3 trebles, and then the next corner. So I'll work all the way around with that, and I'll see you again when I get to the end of that round. I'm back when I've just got my last 3 trebles to put in before the corner, because I wanted just to show you that I've got 2 stitches and then this large the treble stitch. This is where we put our last 3 trebles. And if it doesn't work out for you, if you've maybe got an extra space, or you haven't got enough room to put your 3 trebles in, it's only because you maybe have made a little mistake as you've worked around, and you've maybe missed out one of the sequins. You know, we've got trebles, half trebles, doubles, half trebles, trebles, double trebles, and it may be that you've missed out one of these and moved your corner around. It will be quite obvious because it will be a bit wonky. So if you've done it correctly, it works out absolutely perfectly. Now the very first corner was only half done, so we want to finish that off now, going into that very same space where the first one was made with 1, 2, and then 3 double trebles, and chain 2, and then we just need to find the top of the first, chain 3 to finish it. Now we're not going to cut this yarn because we've got another round of that colour to do, but I want to just show you this first. It is looking decidedly wonky, and I know from feedback I've had from people from other blankets, if it goes like this, they start to get panicky. What have I done wrong? Well, you've done nothing wrong. That's what it's going to look like. It's going to start getting wonky, but as we work, it will flatten out again. So we've got another round to make, and this time we don't need to make stitches of different sizes because we now have our straight edges. We're just going to be doing a round of treble crochet. So with treble crochet, we're not, as I say, we're not finishing off our yarn. We're just going to chain 2, and then for the first time in this square, I'm going to turn it over. Oh, what a mess. We've got all these yarns that I've pulled through to the back as I've been working, and that's going to be sorted very soon. Just ignore it for the time being. So I've chained 2, and we're at this corner. We're going to make this corner to start with, and since the chain 2 has now appeared on the extreme right side of that corner, as you can see, that's going to be the equivalent of the first treble, and we're going to make a complete corner for the first one, not just half of it. And we're not, as I say, working with double trebles for this round. It's just treble stitches. So it's yarn over, put your hook in, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and pull through 2. So the first chain 2 counted as the first treble. I've done 1, so I'm going to do another one, and then I'm going to chain 2 to make my new corner, and then 3 trebles in that same corner space. Now the reason I'm turning is so that I'm working on the wrong side, is that that does help to flatten the square. Now this is just granny clusters, 3 trebles, and you want to jump over those 3 stitches which were the corner stitch from the previous round. There's a big space after them, so we're going to put 3 trebles in there. 1, 2, 3. And then into the next space with 3 trebles. So we're jumping over the clusters from the previous round in a typical granny stitch. 3 trebles. And 3 trebles. This is a little, this one here where we've gone from the 3 half trebles to the 3 doubles. It's a much smaller space. It's a little bit more tricky to find, but it's there. 1, 2, 3, and so on till we come to the corner. 1, 2, 3. This is our final round of the square, by the way. I've got one more cluster of 3 trebles to put in, and then we're on the corner. 1, 2, 3. And there is my large corner space. That's going to get 3 trebles, chain 2, and 3 trebles. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and 3 trebles. 1, 2, and we're round the corner now, and that's the first side, and started the second side of the square, as you can see. So I'm going to work round. It's just there are, let me just count them for you. Let's count the half of the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 clusters on each side. So I'm going to work round and come back again as usual when I've got to the end and show you what it looks like. Welcome back to my bumpy curly square. I've just done my last 3 trebles, and remember that when we did this corner right back at the beginning of this round, we made the complete corner with the 3 trebles, chain 2, 3 trebles. So you just need to slip stitch into the top of the first chain 2 and cut the yarn, and we're finished so far, this part of it. Now it is, I would say, not the prettiest sight at the moment, and if I turn it over, this is the right side. You can do that and it makes a big difference, just flattening it. You could, if you wanted to, put a little bit of steam from an iron over the top of it to flatten it down, or you could block it. I don't do that, and the reason I don't do that is it's going to flatten out, and when you block it or steam it, which involves dampness of some sort, it relaxes the fibres and makes them quite soft. I tend to prefer to leave that until I do the wash at the end when the blanket is complete, because I don't personally like to be working with the crisper unwashed yarn against something that has gone slightly softer. So when I'm, I prefer to keep it all in this state. And anyway, look at it, just by doing that, it has flattened down. We've got 2 more things that are to do, which are going to help to flatten it, and I'll show you what to do. But first, and this is extremely important, we need to stitch these ends in. Now, don't be lazy. Don't think, oh, I'll do these later, because what we're going to do next is the surface chain stitch, the crochet on the surface, and that's going to get ridiculously tangled up with these ends if we don't have them stitched in. So this is where we have to stitch in the ends, and I always start with the center one, because this is the one that we're going to pull tightly to close up that center hole. So this is the first one, and I've threaded it onto my needle, and I'm just going to run it, not going through to the back, just between the stitches, and I'm just going to work round. I'm not pulling it tight at this point, I'm just working pretty much round that circle to roughly where I came back to the beginning, and at this point I'm going to give it a good tug. Sorry, another quick water break, and there you can see that it has pulled it as tightly as any magic ring or circle would have done. Now if you cut your yarn at this point, it would not hold probably, so I usually then go back the way. Now I'll pick up a little bit extra and go back the way. It's almost like making a little stitch there, and I'll work back the way round, and then I might just change direction once more. It's up to you, but the more times you work your stitch, the firmer it will be and it won't come out. And then just pull your yarn up and cut it close to the crochet, but don't cut it too close that you cut a stitch, because that usually becomes a problem later on. So that's our first one. I'll pick up my next one, and the only thing now, you don't need to pull these ones so tightly, but the only thing now is that you want to try to again work through so that you're not showing on the back or the front, and work in a couple of directions. You can weave it, or you can just push it through. Where possible, I try to stitch the colour that's on my needle through the same part, the same colour on the crochet, because it makes it more invisible. Twice or 3 times will be enough, and cut it each time. So I'll go on and I'll stitch in all these ends. I personally tend to leave the last end and stitch it in once the squares are joined. Why? Because I find that if I have stitched that in a couple of directions along near the edge, it can make it difficult to see where to put your stitches. So I just leave it and I stitch it in later, but the rest of them are going to get tidied up now. So I'll see you when I've got a tidy looking square.